Thank you so much for being here. I think I know most people here, but I am Robin Iserlis and the co-founder of West Orange Cares About Schools. Along with Essex Rising and the West Orange African Heritage Organization, we're delighted that you have come tonight to learn more about the two candidates running for the West Orange Board of Education on November 7th. Don't forget the date, go and vote. It is really important that our public school families and community members feel that they are making informed choices in the voting booth. Please share with your friends and neighbors what you learn here tonight. Before we get started, there are several people we'd like to thank for helping us make tonight possible. Patricia West, Elizabeth Redwine, Cindy Matute-Brown, Hazel Estwick, Shannon Gattens, Narisa Svetvelas, Lauren Svetvelas, Jennifer Beezer, Maisha and Steve here at Valley Arts. We'd like to thank those who submitted very thoughtful, relevant questions. The candidates who are here with us tonight, Ken Alper and Chris Diaz, and finally to you for making the time to become informed and get involved. Rachel Gordon and I started WOCAS in January of 2015. As parents who are also educators, we were looking for a forum where we can engage in a dialogue with other parents about the direction of public education, locally, at the state level, and nationally. Almost 3 years later, and over 1,100 Facebook members later, we have built a community space for people to ask questions, plan activities, and share information. We look forward to continuing this work and further collaborating with parents, guardians, and community organizations on important issues that affect our public schools. Our moderator tonight is Cindy Matute-Brown, an educator and West Orange resident for the last 16 years. Cindy is on the steering committee of Essex Rising. In a few moments, Cindy will introduce each of the candidates, who will begin with a 2-minute opening statement. Then Cindy will field 14 questions, allowing each of the candidates to respond for either 1 or 2 minutes. For the last 40 minutes, we will open up the floor to questions from the audience members. There are cards on your chairs. If you'd like to jot down questions, you don't have to pass them up. It's there for you. As we are not a membership-based organization, we do not have money beyond our own pockets for events such as these. As such, you will notice there's a basket in the back of the room. We would be forever grateful if you could throw in a few dollars to help us offset the cost for tonight's event. And also restrooms are in the back over there. And before we begin, I'd like to introduce Patricia West from the West Orange African Heritage Organization, one of our co-sponsors this evening. Thank you.
Good evening. On behalf of the president of West Orange African Heritage Organization, Robert Simmons, the board, and the membership, I bring you greetings. For the second year, we are joining with West Orange Cares About Schools and Essex Rising in sponsoring this important debate. It is consistent with our mission to build strong community. The West Orange African Heritage Organization is a voice for and a center of action to advance academic student achievement and educational advocacy, and responsible citizenship and participation in municipal governance. So I would like to congratulate West Orange Cares About School, Essex Rising, and all of you who have chosen to come here tonight to become informed and knowledgeable about the important issues and the candidates' positions on those issues. And finally, please don't forget to vote, and remind all your family, friends, and neighbors to do the same. Thank you.
Hello everyone, and I echo everyone else's comments. Thank you for coming out this evening, and please make sure you come out and vote and take 2 or 3 people with you. Hi Rose, come on in. We created tonight's questions based on questions submitted to us from the West Orange community. They are separated into 5 themes that contain 1 to 3 relevant questions. Similar questions were consolidated, and we selected the final 14 that you will hear tonight. The candidates were sent the questions 1 week prior to the event, so they had time to prepare their responses. We will be tossing a coin because earlier we didn't do a coin. And whoever wins the coin toss will go first, and we will alternate questions between the two candidates.
Okay, go ahead.
Well,
So Tails and Ken Alper.
okay, so Ken will go first. And towards the end, we will open up the questions for the audience, and we'll have ground rules laid out for those questions and participation. I think that we'll probably go over the ground rules right before, just to remind someone, because I'm sure everyone, including myself, will forget what the ground rules are. Okay, so I'm just going to give a short bio of the candidates for you, for those of you who don't know. Ken Alper. We've given him a card title, so this is Ken. Chris Diaz. Ken Alper is a 20-year resident of West Orange and lives in the Gregory section with his wife, Ronnie, and two sons, Nathaniel, a sophomore at the high school, and Finn, a sixth grader at Edison. He has served on and continues to serve on multiple PTA executive boards, was instrumental in working to get the Gregory school bus lane and Kiss and Go pedestrian safety improvement project completed, and is the Senior Vice President of Research at Survey USA, where he has worked for 22 years. Chris Diaz is an attorney who has been practicing law for almost 2 decades. He is a special needs advocate and committed member of the West Orange community since 2004. He helped bring Girls on the Run to West Orange, and his family personally sponsors the Bubbles for Autism program in our district each and every year. He is a graduate of both Seton Hall University and Rutgers School of Law, and has been a lecturer at the Shippensburg University. Chris and his wife Nicole are proud parents of their daughter Lily, who is a Girl Scout cadet and a 7th grader at Liberty Middle School. So I am going to take a seat, as I might, and we'll be asking questions. Each question will be followed by a time warning, and we will have a timekeeper. Hazel will be keeping time for us. When we open up for questions, we're going to ask if you have questions. There's no cards on your chairs. You can either take notes or write down notes, and then when the floor is open, you can step up to the mic and ask the questions.
So, hi. When Ronnie and I decided to buy our home in West Orange 16 years ago, 4 years after we moved to town, West Orange just felt like home. So we knew it was the place for us. And we chose it because it was a safe community with strong schools and the diversity that we wanted to raise our kids around. And it's still the same now. And we see young families moving into West Orange all the time for these reasons, and that's terrific. So I myself got active in PTA around 7 years ago, and over time became a pretty strong advocate for issues impacting our schools and our children's safety. I served on about 7 separate PTA executive boards, which sounds impossible, but it's true. Currently, I'm on 3 right now. There's a lot of work to be done in town, so you try to step up and do it when you can. At Gregory, as you heard, and many of you know firsthand, I ran the project to build our Kiss and Go lane and bus lane, fighting the opponents of our student safety all the way, even having to fight some supporters of the plan, like the mayor and the superintendent, when they came back to us with a plan that paved over just about the entire front of the school, because they thought we needed more parking. And we had already built consensus with the community that what we wanted was much less than that, and to solve a safety problem, not to have parking for the entire town for the rest of all time. So you probably see me. I go to just about every Board of Ed meeting. I go to every budget hearing because I'm concerned about maintaining both strong programming and being financially responsible. And I went to all the strategic planning meetings that the district did because I care deeply about the direction of this district, and I want to make sure that our schools stay strong. As I said before, I'm a public listener, not so much a public speaker. I read sometimes, I talk too fast, so I thank you in advance for your patience. But I am a really good listener. Ask any of my friends, ask any of the teachers at Gregory who I've talked to at the bus lane, at the Kiss and Go, before and after school, and before the contract dispute, and all throughout it, and certainly, still after. I'm still there most days talking to teachers. I really believe that all the real work happens between the meetings, and that's when you do your research and bring people together, and I hope to do that on the board.
Hi, and thanks for coming out. My name is Chris Diaz, and I'm asking you to elect me to the West Orange Board of Education. I'm asking this because I'm an advocate. I've spent the last 20 years as an attorney advocating for special needs students, for families, for teachers in our community. For 2 years, I've stood before the Board of Education and challenged them on accountability, on better children's programs, and on transparency. I've helped bring Girls on the Run to West Orange, and I sponsor the Bubbles for Autism program in our district every year. But tonight I'm here to give you a message. And that message is that the status quo is happy. It's happy because it thinks that you're not paying attention. The status quo thinks that you'll be satisfied to hear that our biggest problem in this district is communication. That we have problems that can be remedied by fixing our websites or making sure that everyone knows when the next board meeting is. Sure, we could use better communication, but our problems run much deeper than that. We're approaching our last chance for change. We're about to make our final stand. The status quo fears change. It fears exposing mismanagement of our superintendent, of our taxes, and of our resources. It fears opening up a discussion about following the law into the public. It fears rocking the boat when it comes to test scores and student achievement. The truth is that good intentions die on the sword of inaction. We can no longer fail to act. I want you to know that I'm the candidate of change, and I hope that you'll join me in bringing that change on November 2nd. Thank you.
The first theme is equity and social justice. And Ken won the coin toss, so Ken, this first question is for you, and you will have 2 minutes each to answer this question. So the first question is, how do you explain the difference between equality and equity with respect to education? You have 2 minutes, Ken.
So equality is obvious, that everyone's the same. Equity is a little more complicated. Equity really means in education that your circumstances shouldn't be obstacles to obtaining equality, whether your circumstances are your level of income or your gender or your race or your disability or lack of disability. So you might have seen a cartoon that was on Facebook a lot a few months ago with some kids trying to look over a fence to watch a baseball game. And one was really tall, one was really short, one was in the middle. So to illustrate equality, the cartoon showed each kid getting an equally sized box. So the tall kid was even taller, the middle kid could see fine, and the short kid still couldn't see. The next panel showed equity, though, and in equity, the tall kid who didn't need a box didn't have that extra support. The middle kid could now see over still with his one box, and the short kid got 2 boxes because he needed that additional support to be raised up to be equal with everyone else. So, how does that work in the classroom? It's similar. A child who has dyslexia or another reading issue might need to have a test question read to him, while a child who doesn't have that issue might not. Similarly with funding, there's people who say every district in the state should get the same dollar amount per pupil out of the state, and that doesn't work because our districts have different needs. West Orange has 46% of its students at the high school on free or reduced lunch. We definitely need more money per pupil to bring our students up to that level than they do in Milburn or Livingston, where it's 1 or 2%. Similarly, parental involvement is difficult when parents are working and working hourly jobs and can't come to daytime conferences. So an equity thing that the district could do would be to move some conferences into the evening so parents could come. Maybe even have translators available for those evening conferences so that parents can participate more fully in their children's education. So that's equity versus equality.
Thank you, Ken. Chris, I'll pose the same question to you. How do you explain the difference between equality and equity with respect to education? And you have 2 minutes.
Thank you. So equity and equality are not interchangeable. Sound alike, but they're not interchangeable. In education, the differences in these concepts are crucial. For example, when we talk about whether one school should get more funding per student as opposed to another school, that's a question of equality. When we talk about students, students who are at an economic disadvantage and whether they should get more to ensure whether or not they're given the same opportunities as their peers, then that's a question of equity. And let's be clear, this is not simply a question of throwing money at a problem. We have students in our district who have serious socioeconomic disadvantages, language barriers, and learning challenges. Simply giving them the access to the same resources that their higher income peers have is not enough. It's a matter of making sure that they have enthusiastic and well-trained teachers. It's a matter of expanding our summer bridge program from just the high school into the middle school and the elementary schools. It's making sure that the schools have the necessary funds to close the gap with higher performing schools. It's making sure that we live our commitment to our special education students. Making sure that we address implicit bias in our classrooms. Making sure that we provide better diversity and inclusion training for our teachers and our kids. That we address African American heritage and Latino heritage on not just designated months. And that we work towards providing universal and free tutoring and student support services.
Thank you. Okay, our second question. In light of the recent demographer's report of the racial and ethnic composition of West Orange, several concerns have been brought to the BOE's attention. In particular, the underrepresentation of students of color at the West Orange High School Senior Awards Night and Honors Program, as well as an overrepresentation of students of color in the special ed program district-wide. This is a two-part question. First part, you'll each have 1 minute to answer. What would you do as a member of the BOE to address these inequities? We're alternating, so Chris?
Thank you. So these are not problems with easy answers. However, it's important that the appropriate questions be asked so that we can find solutions. In large part, this is where a call to transparency in my platform is essential. I've called for data regarding race and gender and secretive testing in the form that forms the basis of our honors program. We don't know what level of bias, implicit or not, is present in that test. I've also called for tutoring and support services at no cost to help narrow the divide for children who don't have access to computers and third-party academic instruction and who struggle with standardized testing. The board has to be proactive in this regard as opposed to reactive.
Thank you. Same question, Ken. What would you do as a member of the Board of Ed to address these inequities? And you have 1 minute.
So the good news is there actually is no overrepresentation of students of color in special education. That's just not true. Page 35 of the demographer's report for total enrollment in the district, which you can pull right off the WOBO site. I've got it with me if people want to see it later. And from the state, you can get special ed numbers for each district in the state on its website as an Excel spreadsheet. I've got a printout of that too. If you compare, they're nearly identical, which is good to see. I've read a lot of stories that there are districts out there. I don't think there's any here, certainly not West Orange, that are essentially dumping students of color in special ed, saying that they're discipline problems and they don't want to deal with them. And the data show that that's not happening in West Orange, and I'd be outraged if it were. As far as the senior awards, they're done blind by the West Orange Scholarship Foundation. No one knows who the applicants are or what their names or ethnicity are. If students of color are underrepresented, to me that sounds like a pipeline problem. We need to do a lot more to make sure that we can encourage more students of color to apply for these programs, whether that's reaching out from guidance or elsewhere. Same with honors, widen the paths.
Thank you. Part B to that question, and Ken, since Chris had A first, you will do B first. As a follow-up, as a board member, what changes would you propose to diversify our faculty and staff so that it better reflects our community? And you each have 1 minute.
Okay, so there's lots of good ideas on this. The district should be attending minority job fairs if it's not already. One thing that's been said a lot is reach out to historically black colleges and universities that have strong teacher training programs. Jackson State, Tennessee State, and especially Fayetteville State are really good examples of this. Fayetteville's got this program called BMT, Black Men Teaching. And they actually go out into the local area and they recruit high school sophomores and juniors, provide mentors and other supports, and encourage them to become teachers, because this is a shortage nationally, certainly not just in West Orange. So I'd love to see us not just work with them, but to take their ideas and share those ideas with the nearby schools that send us so many of our student teachers, St. Peter's, Montclair State, College of St. Elizabeth, Seton Hall, and so on, to get them to do the same thing and recruit minority students from local high schools to get them into teacher training. It's a really important initiative, and I'd love to see West Orange do that and work with these colleges.
Same question, Chris, as a follow-up. As a board member, what changes would you propose to diversify our faculty and staff so that it better reflects our community? And you have 1 minute.
So to be clear, a good teacher is a good teacher. Having the best teachers is our top priority, always. Still, we need to recognize that in a beautifully diverse population, having educators who reflect our student population helps enrich a child's academic experience and also provides role models for children that might not have them otherwise. As a Latino, I can see that we're certainly lacking in our staff and administration when it comes to people of color. In my view, it's not simply about recruitment, but about aggressive recruitment. There are countless diversity fairs for educators where we can make our presence felt as a district. Do we attend some? Yes. Should we be attending more? Absolutely. If we can recruit the best qualified individuals of color in our community, then all the better. Also, we should be encouraging our young people of color to consider entering the education field and making that a career going forward.
Thank you. Our third question, and Chris, you will answer this since we're alternating. In the aftermath of the recent racially charged incident at the high school, as well as expressions of racial injustice at the state and national levels, what do you think is the responsibility of members of the Board of Education to respond? How do you propose the BOE act more proactively in this climate? And you have 2 minutes to answer this question.
This incident didn't happen in a bubble. Clearly, it had been brewing for some time, and by all indications, students had brought incidents of racial intolerance and injustice to the attention of teachers and administrators. And when you have situations like this that don't go unaddressed and are allowed to fester, eventually they reach a breaking point. Now, I'll say this. There does appear to have been incidents of HIB on both sides in this issue, and the board has handled them in accordance with state law and policy. But the response, again, is reactive and not proactive. As I've said before, we need better diversity training for our faculty and staff. We need to turnkey that to our students. I've proposed ways to enhance our HIB policy. Right now, we're doing the minimum, and that's not enough. Racial tensions are at a high point everywhere. Children are taking their own lives. My plan would be to reach out to the students themselves. The board can conduct surveys of our students to find out how safe they feel in our schools, and are we doing enough to protect them from incidents of harassment, intimidation, and bullying. With that information, we can develop programs that assist us in helping to prevent incidents of harassment, intimidation, and bullying. Right now, we only react to situations as the one in the high school. I'll say it again. Waiting for an incident and then patting yourself on the back for how you handled it is just simply not acceptable.
Ken, in the aftermath of the recent racially charged incident at the high school, as well as expressions of racial injustice at the state and national levels, what do you think is the responsibility of members of the Board of Education to respond? How do you propose the BOE act more proactively in this climate? And you have 2 minutes.
So as a parent, I'm outraged. It's not acceptable, not in West Orange, not anywhere, but not here. These are really serious things. When things like this happen, I would want to see the board president and another member of the board sit with the superintendent, the principal, and anyone else who's relevant to the conversation as soon as possible to make sure that our communications are coordinated and accurate and timely, so that a responsible answer can be issued and so that it can get out there ahead. Not that you can get ahead of, but because social media is all over it as soon as it happens, and in an information vacuum, stories get made up, and it's critical that the district be on top of these things. As a Board of Ed member, prospectively, I'd like to see that done that way too, but then your hands are a little more tied because you may have to sit and judge the situation in the disciplinary hearing, so you have to be careful that you aren't on record making your own statements about exactly what happened because you have to be able to judge it. But the district as a whole absolutely has to respond. And Chris is absolutely right. Proactive is more important than reactive. And the good news is the district has taken some steps already that I think will be proactive in the future. That We Are the Answer video that the students at the high school produced is a great start. Hate Has No Home signs for the schools is, it sets the right message. I know it's just a sign, but it sends an important message to our kids. I'd like to see more like that. Also, I know the Essex County Prosecutor's Office will come in and do an assembly for free with a judge, a prosecutor, and a team who's gotten in legal trouble for this sort of thing in the past, online, and it's, our kids I love my kids, but they don't have mature brains and they don't always do the right thing. And our telling them that they have to be better, not just in what they do, but what they think and how they feel, it goes over their heads in one ear and out the other. And I think hearing this from official people like that goes a lot further, and I'd like to see that done and see the board encourage those sorts of assemblies.
Thank you. So our next theme is superintendent. And Ken, you'll start this answer. The superintendent's contract is up for renewal. If you were on the Board of Ed and asked to vote, would you vote to support the renewal? If so, why? If not, why not? You have a minute.
So I'm committed to always making data-based decisions for the district, and I only have half the data, the feedback from parents, teachers, and administrators who I know and trust. But I don't have any data from the superintendent. I don't have numbers on academic success or reasons that he thinks he should be renewed. Nothing. And because I'm not currently on the board, I can't see his personnel file, which would also be a critical thing to have access to before you can make that decision, because it has confidential information in it that we're not privy to as members of the public. It would just be irresponsible to decide or to announce how you would decide ahead of seeing that. I understand why he is so disliked, but as a prospective board member, I owe him the same fair hearing that I would give to anyone else. And I have to keep an open mind until I've heard from him too. Then I can decide. I'm not a politician, and I can't tell you what you want to hear. I have to tell you what I feel, and that's that I'm committed to using data and facts to make the right decision. I do find it confusing that the current board has unanimously given him his most recent merit raise, but that's also one of many facts here. We need to see them all.
Thank you. Chris, same question to you. The superintendent's contract is up for renewal. If you were on the Board of Ed and asked to vote, would you vote to support the renewal? If so, why? If not, why not?
This question is kind of like asking a judge to make a decision before he's been appointed to the bench. But as an attorney, I know it's important to hear from all sides in order to get the best possible understanding of any given situation. I definitely would want to hear from the superintendent about why he feels he should be given a new contract. I would want to review all of his detailed evaluations that have been prepared by the board. It's important to hear everyone. However, what I can tell you is this. What I know now is that the superintendent has shown, at least to the people that I know, the people who I've talked to, and myself, that he's not a good fit for West Orange. Taken in totality, he's encouraged a climate of distrust and low morale amongst our teachers. He's made inaccurate statements about law and policy at board meetings. In many cases, he's ignored the pleas of special education parents and have embarrassed the district with his lack of empathy as displayed by the Sandy Hook letter. My opponent will tell you he's not good at communicating, but that's not true.
Thank you. Our next question, and Chris, you will start with first in answering. There are a great many parents, teachers, and staff who continue to be quite discouraged with the climate of disrespect coming from the district administration as well as from the Board of Education. How would you address this if you were elected? What would you do to heal some of the wounds that continue to fester? You have 1 minute.
So piggybacking off of what I just said, we've gotten communication from our superintendent, and he's communicated that he's just not a good fit for West Orange at this point. However, I've proposed that the board undertake climate surveys specifically aimed towards our parents, our teachers, and our staff. It's the responsibility of the board to obtain crucial information that helps in its management of our district and its one direct employee, the superintendent. At the last board meeting, I watched as our board president and other members fought against the motion to even open up a discussion about these surveys. The rationale was that not enough people participate. That's a defeatist attitude from the outset. If elected, I'd call out board members for behavior unbecoming of elected officials. Yelling at parents at meetings, sniping at each other via social media is behavior that we don't tolerate from our children. Why should we be tolerating it from our board members? I'd remind my fellow members that we're members of a family in West Orange, and we should start treating each other as such.
Thank you. Ken, same questions for you. There are a great many parents, teachers, and staff who continue to be quite discouraged with the climate of disrespect coming from the district administration as well as from the Board of Education. How would you address this if you were elected? What would you do to heal some of the wounds that continue to fester? And you have 1 minute.
Sure, and I love surveys. It's what I do every day for work, but I think we know what the problem is here. And I think one good solution is the superintendent needs to speak to staff members in small groups. He needs to acknowledge his mistakes, and he needs to pledge to do better, and do so. No administrators, just staff and superintendent talking freely, sort of to reset the relationship, or at least try to reset it. And not just with teachers, with the folks who actually run the schools day to day, with the office staff and the custodial staff, about what's really going on in their day to day, again, without their boss there to interfere. There were Facebook posts recently about how the superintendent spoke at the ASAP meeting at the high school, and he addressed the students with respect and encouragement. So we know he can. And I'd like to see him do the same thing with our teachers and our non-teaching staff as well. If he can't or if he won't, that becomes more data toward the renewal decision as well. But it sounds to me like a good place to start trying to heal some of these wounds.
Thank you. Our sixth question, and Ken, you will start with this answer. What do you consider the board's responsibility as it relates to the oversight of the superintendent regarding the implementation and evaluation of school programs? You have 1 minute.
So the board's entire job is to create policy for the superintendent and the administration to work within. And the current board has largely failed at this. It doesn't necessarily have to be an adversarial relationship. It hopefully can be collaborative. But board members represent the public. They don't work for the superintendent or for the district. They work for us. And they need to do things like slow the superintendent down if changes are coming too fast, give staff time to absorb what's coming and see if it works. If you give it time to see if it works, you'll have an easier time getting buy-in for the next thing you want to do. And that also gives the board time to talk informally to staff and get their feedback. And again, the superintendent needs to be doing that too. You know, what the board shouldn't be doing is micromanaging, because the district hires professional administrators. The board's job here is to hold them accountable for what they do, not to micromanage each decision they make, but to create policy for them to work within and then see that they live up to it.
Thank you. Chris, same question. What do you consider the board's responsibility as it relates to the oversight of the superintendent regarding the implementation and evaluation of school programs? And you have 1 minute.
So, as I said before, the superintendent is the board's one direct report employee. It's the super's job to make sure that the day-to-day affairs of the schools are attended to and that the schools are properly run. But for all intents and purposes, the superintendent is the CEO of the schools, and the Board of Education is the board of directors. In the real world, when a board of directors doesn't manage its CEO, the board gets replaced. It also has an obligation to follow the law. The simple fact of the matter is that the board has allowed the superintendent to create a secret honors test without ever vetting it. That is against the law. Now, no one is asking that the board be permitted to micromanage tests and test questions. That's just ridiculous. But the board has an obligation under the law to review the test and vote on it in open public meeting, which it has not done. I make sure that the superintendent put everything before the board that the law requires.
Thank you. The next theme of question is the makeup of the Board of Education and the Board of Education meeting structures. Chris, you will answer this first. Would you support expanding the Board of Education to 7 members? If so, why? If not, why not? And you have 1 minute.
I'd support expanding the board to 7 members. I think that it's always a good idea to have as diverse a pool of personalities and viewpoints as possible in order to attain the best possible outcome. There are some who might say, well, we have 5 members and they can hardly get along, so why add 2 more? But I would counter that productive disagreement is a good thing. We can elect, when we elect people to the board who aren't beholden to politics or who move in lockstep with administration, then you have a real opportunity to begin to open things up to a diversity of independent opinions. I just don't see the downside to something like that.
Ken, same to you. Would you support expanding the Board of Education to 7 members? If so, why? If not, why not? And you have 1 minute.
At this time, I'm a no. I go to lots of meetings on PTA boards of all different sizes, planning board meetings, town council, board of ed, freeholders, and in my personal experience, the smaller the body, the more it gets done, the more efficient it is. You know, we're just 5 and meetings go past midnight all the time at the board of ed. I don't know that 2 more people talking is going to provide much other than more words and longer meetings and not get anything done. You know, give me a year's experience, I might change my mind on that when I see what the workload is like, but my feeling right now is no. You know, more views are great, and I want more views, and that's why I've been calling so often and so many times for town hall meetings. You know, they're a great way to do that and get the voices from the entire community, and not just from 5 or 7 people at once, but to bring everyone in and help understand where the community is before you're making decisions.
Thank you, Ken. And this question you will answer first. How would you propose the structure of the Board of Education meetings be improved to enable more engagement from the public? And you have 1 minute.
I got 4 things on this. First, and I love the student awards that they've been giving at the beginning of meetings recently. I think it's fantastic to have that recognition for the kids, but I'd pull them out of the Board of Ed meetings. Do 2 or 3 special events a year for that, for just those awards. It'll make it even more special, and it'll streamline the board meetings. I would love to see 15 minutes of early public comment at the beginning of the meeting. Maybe folks sign up for it ahead of time, just 5 3-minute slots. You can say what you think early, get out of there and go home to your kids. You don't have to stay there until 11 or whatever to give your opinion if it's not on the agenda. I'd love to see board members, and I know they do this sometimes, if they're going into closed session after the meeting, I'd love to see them stick around for 15 minutes first and answer some questions. And the other thing, that 3-minute timer that us members of the public have when we get up to talk, I want that for board members. When board members are giving their reports, 3 minutes as well. We don't need to go on and on. If there's something important, we can do it in another part of the meeting. But your report should be, same as the public. Thanks.
Thank you. Chris, how would you propose the structure of the Board of Education meetings be improved to enable more engagement from the public? And you have 1 minute.
Meetings run too long. We all know this. We've attended board meetings that go into the next day, sometimes till 1 a.m., and it's absurd to think that working parents who have to get their kids up for school the next morning, or teachers who have to get up the next morning and educate our children, have that kind of time. It's almost as if the meetings are structured to inhibit most participation from the public. I would propose that streamlining the meeting to permit public comment on agenda and non-agenda items be made sooner. I'd also propose limiting the superfluous discussions that don't really pertain to matters before the board to a minimum. It's nice when the board members can tell us what events they've been to and personal anecdotes, but it's not at the expense of public time.
Thank you. Chris, you'll answer this one first. The next theme is curriculum. Given the 20 minutes allotted for recess in the elementary schools and none in the 7th, 8th grades, would you support a trial period of building more active movement breaks during the day? If so, what would this look like? If not, why not? You have 1 minute.
Okay. So science supports that frequent movement breaks improves mental function and academic performance. The Journal of Sport and Exercise Psychology also found that elementary school children who were given 4 15-minute movement breaks per day not only improved academically, but were significantly more empathetic to their peers than students who were not given that same amount of time. Now, I know we're on a tight schedule during the day at school, but it is possible to incorporate movement in the classroom while still learning. Many of our teachers are actually doing this independently now. So yes, it's something that I would wholeheartedly support.
Thank you. Ken, given the 20 minutes allotted for recess in the elementary schools and none in the 7th and 8th grades, would you support a trial period of building more active movement breaks during the day? If so, what would this look like? If not, why not? And you have 1 minute.
Absolutely. I think we've reached the point of the meeting where we agree on everything again. Right? Good teachers already do this a lot. They're using Go Noodle, which is in most buildings, as far as the elementary buildings, obviously, to get the kids up and doing some stuff, and the kids seem to really like that. And I'd like to make sure that as a prospective board member, I would want to see a policy strongly encouraging principals to let their teachers do this and to have the freedom to move around, maybe go outside and work out there if it's a nice day. It's really important. The challenge, the curriculum demands, Common Core, and which I know isn't the thing anymore, but that's what we're still calling it, most of us. We have to test on everything you learned in a whole school year in April. So every teacher is racing to get to the end of their content. So it's hard to find the time to do that. So we need the administrative and board support to make it happen.
Thank you. Ken, you will answer this question first next. The Amistad Law has been in effect for 15 years in New Jersey. What do you know about the district's Amistad curriculum? How would you ensure the district is integrating the content of the legislation in a thorough and complete manner? And what types of cultural competency training of faculty and administration would you support? You have 2 minutes.
So Cindy actually mentioned this at the rally at Town Hall after Charlottesville, and I was curious. So I reached out to the district social studies coordinator for 6 to 12, Steve Olszewski, and what I found out was the law on this was passed in 2002, but New Jersey didn't find it important enough to fund until 2010. So not only did districts not have the funds to do anything unless they were doing it themselves, but the commission itself wasn't allowed to hire anyone or write any curriculum themselves. They didn't have any money until 2010. So since then, though, it's improved. There's obviously still some work to be done, but teachers have been sent to training at Kane and Montclair State, and they've been going to workshops that are specifically focused on implementation ideas. Textbooks and other resources are now required to actually be aligned with the Amistad curriculum. And the idea is that this is all fully embedded in the curriculum, in the lessons, and not just something that gets pulled out in February or put in a little sidebar in the corner of the textbook, but that it's there all the time. And cultural competency training is obviously critical in a district the size of ours and as diverse as ours, in the size of ours that's as diverse as ours. And I fully support bringing in speakers on professional development days, sending teachers out to workshops on these topics, and so on.
Thank you. Chris, same question. The Amistad law has been in effect for 15 years in New Jersey. What do you know about the district's Amistad curriculum? How would you ensure the district is integrating the content of this legislation in a thorough and complete manner? And what types of cultural competency training of faculty and administration would you support? And do you have 2 minutes?
So the goal of our Amistad curriculum is to ensure that the history of African Americans and Africans is infused into our social studies curriculum in a full and complete manner. This is supposed to be done in conjunction with workshops and seminars and other events that help create an awareness and of the importance of African Americans and their contributions in a global sense. We need to ensure that we follow this curriculum, and there are ways to accomplish this. So I decided I'd go to a source, and I asked my daughter's social studies teacher about some of the ways that he thinks that it could be done, and it really made a lot of sense. We need to communicate better with supervisors and teachers about the types of materials that they're actually using in the classroom. Are they outdated? Do they address diversity? Do they emphasize the importance of African American contributions? We also need to supplement these lessons with activities and events that give children a hands-on understanding of these contributions, and not just during African American Heritage Month. The board should mandate competency training along with initiatives for diversity training. There should be a systemic plan to share information about new initiatives and programs that focus on African Americans and their contributions. And we should create focus groups that address diversity in our staff and in our recruitment efforts.
Thank you. Chris, you will answer this first. The next theme is budget. How would you prioritize budget decisions should you be elected? What areas would you identify to expand funding? What areas would you identify to reduce or redistribute funding? And you have 2 minutes.
So one of the planks of my platform has been transparency. I've had a very difficult time reconciling the fact that we raised taxes in West Orange by $5 million this year, yet supposedly saved on healthcare costs and eliminated lots of positions within the district. Apparently we passed a budget that has hidden costs, and either the board didn't realize that or knew about it. Either way, that's the problem. I've been calling for a third-party forensic accounting of the district. We know where when we know where we're spending our money, we'll have a better idea of what, if anything, can be cut, and where we should be refocusing the resources that we do have. Personally, I proposed providing free tutoring and support services for students who otherwise would not have access to them outside of school. I proposed enhancements to our HIP program, which can be done with training that's provided with independent contractors. And I've called for the board to obtain grant money through corporate foundational grants that will help pay for many of the programs that we currently have, and allow us the opportunity to even add those while not add additional programs without burdening the taxpayer. Our own town council employs a grant writer, and we should as well. The millions of dollars that we leave on the table would not only lessen the burden on the taxpayer, but allow us the possibility of avoiding having to cut programs that are beneficial to our students, while also giving us the opportunity to bring in new programs as well.
Thank you. Ken, same question. How would you prioritize budget decisions should you be elected? What areas would you identify to expand funding? What areas would you identify to reduce or redistribute funding? 2 minutes.
So priorities will always have to be money that goes to classrooms, to student safety, and to critical maintenance projects that can't be put off. I would include even money to find somebody to get those evening parent-teacher conferences in there too, because getting the parental involvement going is so important to us. That counts as classroom spending. But places to trim, we know that about 3/4 of the budget is salary, benefits, and energy costs. As the district has done in the past, they need to continue to shop insurance each year to make sure that the district is getting the best possible rates there, because even a little change to insurance costs is really big to the district. The board needs to continue doing the reverse energy auctions that have been saving money on, power. There needs to be a little bit of an investigation into what I don't really want to call, but I don't have a better word, supply abuse. There seems to be a thing where people are trying to use their budgets up at the end of the year, and no one's really checking to see how much paper or Post-it notes or whatever they already have in the supply closet, or calling to see if maybe one school's got a whole bunch of paper before they order more of their own. We could probably do a better job there. Otherwise, I want to sit down with the business administrator and look at that 25% remaining of discretionary spending and see where we can save some money there. Places to expand, it's hard because obviously we have limited dollars here. I know that grant writing is a fantastic idea. A grant writer is definitely something the district should employ. And in the meantime, I know teachers on their own have been submitting and winning grant applications, and I'd love to find a way for the board to help support that. But maybe they can send some teachers out to seminars so that they can help each other and learn a little and then train themselves until they can find money for a grant writer position, so that we can get more money to the classrooms that way.
Thank you, Ken. Next question, Ken, you will answer first. Many advocates of public education are concerned about the recent trend towards privatizing educational services as a cost-cutting measure. What do you think about privatization in this context? And if you support it, what areas would you consider privatizing? You have 2 minutes.
So I like to say I have an open mind about things. Privatization, it's really hard to say that. I know it's a trend, I know it saves money, but I think it's generally really bad. My first concern is always that you give up a layer of security if you're privatizing services that are directly involved with kids, because you now have a for-profit organization making the decisions about who to hire and whether or not those people should be in a room with your children, which scares me. You also give up a certain level of control. Pop-Tarts, right? Who's not thrilled that they sell Pop-Tarts in the cafeterias and all the other junk food that they sell in the cafeterias? Sodexo is a for-profit company, and thankfully I'm not aware that there have been any security issues there, but one of the issues with having outsourced food, however many years ago we did that, is you give up some layer of control there. You're not able to say, look, we don't want the junk food, we're going to get rid of it, because they say, well, we make a lot of money on it, we can't afford to do without it. Similarly, busing is something else that the district outsourced years ago and saved some money on, and the cafeteria food and the busing are two of the things that you see complaints about on social media all the time. So something else, we want to see how the satisfaction is with busing. From the beginning of the year on Facebook, it looked like it was better than it had been the year before. But those are, again, two privatized services that people aren't thrilled with, and the board should definitely review them. And there's nothing that I would currently consider privatizing out. You have to have an open mind. I listen to proposals, but I'm very skeptical.
Thank you. Chris, same question. Many advocates of public education are concerned about the recent trend toward privatizing educational services as a cost-cutting measure. What do you think about privatization in this context? And if you support it, what areas would you consider privatizing? 2 minutes.
So I oppose privatization. It's inherently wrong to view schools as businesses. It's the idea that test scores equal profitability. That's especially abhorrent when what inevitably occurs is students of teachers who get high achievement scores are rewarded in the same way that employees earn bonuses. But when scores are low, it's analogous to an unprofitable business, which may mean layoffs. Losing good teachers and leaving behind students who need a hand up simply is not good policy. I think research shows that charter schools have not appreciably improved the quality of education overall, and that the profit model perverts the goal of education. Now, when it comes to private dollars, I am completely for obtaining private dollars through grants and foundational grants, and going after the money that we've left on the table, millions of dollars that has been approved and put into our strategic plan that the board has not acted on. That type of grant money doesn't connect us in any way to the schools becoming for-profit businesses, but it allows us to obtain funds to put in place programs that we can currently see need to be in place in our schools or that need to be supplemented. So when it comes to privatization, I'm opposed. When it comes to going after corporate money for grants to help lessen the burden on the taxpayer, I'm all for that.
Thank you. And our next theme is the 2 closing questions from what we've collected. Chris, you will answer this first closing question. What specific knowledge and experience, whether from your personal or professional life, do you bring to address the issues that have been identified this evening? You have 1 minute.
I'm an advocate. I've advocated for special needs students, for teachers, and for children in the middle and all throughout our community for going on 20 years. I bring an analytical and thorough approach to reviewing policy and law and 2 decades of
Are these
experience in
questions that people
negotiation.
want to ask? I'm going to open it up. I'm going to open up the rules, and then everybody can come to the mic to ask questions.
While making sure that we adhere to the law. I bring compassion and understanding. I spent the first 20 years of my life in the inner city. I know how hard it can be to not have the resources that your friends have, or how working at an early age to help support your family makes it harder for you to focus on your education. I bring the heart of a dad who promised his daughter, and now all of West Orange kids, to do right by them at all times. Most importantly, I bring you my promise to fight hard for you and to always speak truth to power.
Thank you. Ken, what specific knowledge and experience, whether your personal or professional life, do you bring to address the issues that have been identified in this meeting this evening? 1 minute.
So personally, both my sons have IEPs, so I've navigated that system, worked a lot with the teachers and administrators in our special education department, and I've got that firsthand experience with the department's strengths and weaknesses. And also personally, I've worked for many years in our PTAs and gone to the strategic planning sessions, the budget hearings, the Board of Ed meetings. I do all this because I care so much about where the district is headed, and I want to help guide it in the right direction. Professionally, 22 years in market research gives me a strong background in data analysis. I'm skilled with working with numbers, which is something I think we really need on the board. It's not an entirely unheard of perspective, but it's unusual. You don't usually get numbers people there. I'm also a listener. I listen to what my friends say, what parents are saying on the blacktop, to what my own kids are telling me at dinner. I listen to our teachers, and then I come up with answers. I'm a hard worker with a history of stepping up when needed, of working to build consensus, and of providing data-based solutions that work. And I hope you'll elect me to serve on our school board. I'm asking for your vote tonight because I think my ideas and commitment will make a real difference to our families.
Thank you. Ken, you will start answering this one. What book or books have most influenced your thinking on education policy and why? You have 1 minute.
I'm a big fan of Diane Ravitch. The Death and Life of the Great American School System is one in particular, but you should read her blog if you haven't heard of her. She's really worth seeking out. She was a testing advocate from the old days in the Reagan administration and the Department of Education, and she saw the light and sort of realized what a disaster they'd created. And you know, that book's all about how testing and choice are undermining education, and that's exactly what it sounds like. Also very influential, although it's not a book, it's a documentary, is Race to Nowhere, which I can't say enough about. You know, it focuses on the ridiculous level of stress that our current system puts on our kids. And all for what, right? We're losing critical thinking skills because we're focusing on the wrong things and on the wrong kind of learning. That's actually been out for about almost 10 years now. I think you can just find it on your phone. I think you can rent it off Amazon or YouTube and watch it for $4. It's worth the hour and a half because it's, you know, it goes back to No Child Left Behind, but it's still very on point.
Thank you. Okay, so for those of you, oh, I'm sorry.
I read too.
Chris, I am so sorry. Chris, what book or books have most influenced your thinking on education policy and why?
So tonight when you go home, open up your Amazon account and order a book called First Do No Harm. It's a book by Steve Nelson. It makes the wonderful case for doing away with the standard factory approach to education. Move them in, move them out. And instead, it stresses the importance of educating the whole child. Nelson stresses that we need to teach children how to participate in our democracy and teach them about their role as citizens. I recommend it to the hilt. Please pick it up, please read it. I also really enjoyed I Learn from Children, which is a book by a woman named Caroline Pratt. She discusses the fact that the choices that we make as a whole, as a community and a society, affect how we raise our children and how we educate them, and that it's important to educate children critically so that they'll help preserve our future. Both books have helped shape my perspective when it comes to education.
Okay, and Chris, my apologies again. I'm so sorry. And as many of you know, I am an advocate, and I'm always ready to listen to everyone else. And not that I don't want to listen to you, but I want to.
Everyone but Chris, you mean? Or?
No. I just was I'm eager to have participation because I saw some cards on this end ready to be brought up. So for those of you who weren't here at the beginning of the meeting, we are going to open up for questions. And if you have questions that you would like to ask, the mic is here. Please step forward, but I'm going to give some ground rules first. And also, if you don't want to read your question and want to pass them up, that would be fine as well. Toward that end, the question should be brief, concise, and respectful. Questions may only be addressed to both candidates. There are no questions for specific candidates. Each candidate will have 1 minute to respond to the question.
How would you address false claim to the board or public by the superintendent? Will you make sure that the board and public are not misled by the superintendent and other administrators? And also, how you will be addressing the huge numbers of complaints that we're currently receiving through the Department of Education, as well as from the OCR of Office of Civil Rights? Thank you.
So we'll start with Chris. You have 1 minute to answer this question.
Sure, and I think that this speaks to my expertise as an attorney. When we had our Board of Education meeting last year, right before the day of election, the superintendent cited a statute with respect to aides and whether or not we could have aides in certain classrooms. His reading of the statute was patently wrong. There wasn't a member of the board who took the statute and questioned him on it while he sat there. That is something that I would absolutely do. I have the ability to read statutes, I have the ability to synthesize them and to understand them. It's part of what I do for a living. So I would call the board, I would call the superintendent out when he miscites the law, when he miscites policy. I'm not going to let that kind of thing slide. When it comes to the complaints that have been levied against the district, I've called for an audit. I've called for an audit of every IEP in our district. I've called for an audit of complaints with respect to civil rights to find out how we are treating our children and how safe they feel in our schools. And that's something that I would press as a member of the Board of Education.
Ken, you have 1 minute.
Okay, so, I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a special education lawyer. I'm just a guy who tries to pay attention and, look things up. I was there when the aid claim got made and when it got debunked, and I still don't understand how that happened and how people in the audience were the first ones to bother Googling it because it didn't make sense the way it was being explained. Yeah, I would speak up as well if something was that obvious to me. I'm not going to know the finer points of the law sitting up there as a Board of Education member. That's why the board has an attorney, on call. I know the special education audit is in process. I look forward to seeing the results of that so that we can see what the district needs to do next to address what the actual problems are. I don't know. I don't know the status of these complaints. We'll deal with them when we see them and address them appropriately because everybody should be heard, and we're, don't know what to tell you other than that we would look at what was written and see it. I don't know the status of the complaints that exist because I'm not privy to them. If I'm elected and I see them, I will address them. And if something's being done wrong or illegally, I will say so.
Good evening, Tammy Williams, West Orange resident. The Board of Education, the West Orange Human Relations Commission, the West Orange High School Unity Club, and the West Orange Public Library Tag Group held a team talk on 10/25/17 to discuss the recent racial incident at the high school. Not one member of the Board of Ed or candidate attended to hear our actual student concerns. How do you reconcile having the children's interests at heart when we aren't even present to hear their concerns?
Yes, I'm sorry. 1 minute.
That's a good question. I wish I could have been there. I didn't realize that was necessarily an adult event. I thought that was just between teens and moderators, but, I would have been happy to have been there if I could have and if I knew more about that. I think we need to be having more conversations like that. I don't know what the appropriate audience is or appropriate, group of people to sit on a panel or discusses in each case, but, it's a wonderful thing, and I wish I'd made it.
Chris, you have 1 minute.
I knew about the event, and I made every effort, I promise you, to attend that event. I work out in Hunterdon County, and sometimes 287 is an unforgiving road, and that night it was. I'm hoping that I can attend the next one. Yes, board members should be present at something like this. Yes, candidates should have been present at something like this. I want to let you know that as part of my outreach in this campaign, I have reached out to our seniors at the high school. I have members of the senior class who have come and supported me and shown up at my events, have shown up at rallies for me, have shown up and supported me, and have talked me up to their parents and their friends who can vote, because they believe that I am someone who can carry this board into the future. And I want to let you know that I'm listening to them, because it's important to listen to the youth of our community, and that's something that I will always do.
Thank you. So if anyone else wants to approach the mic, otherwise I have questions. Oh, please. Thank you.
How are you? My name is Jeremiah Salinas. I'm an educator. I've been in education for the past 14 years. I work in Woodbridge Township, which is the 5th or 6th largest township in New Jersey. A lot of the things that are happening there in a town that has close to 500,000 people is beginning to happen here, which is we're beginning to have a huge change in our demographics, something that doesn't seem to be addressed in our school districts. Something that doesn't seem to be addressed in our town. Because we don't seek to bring in the people that are moving in to our schools, because we're not inviting them in. We're not allowing them to talk. We're not allowing them to come meet teachers at a back to school night that was a disaster in my opinion. We don't have enough people representing or willing to be able to talk to these people. What would you two do in order to sort of bridge that gap? In addition to that, the question was asked about what you would do with the superintendent. It's very clear to me, and probably everybody in here, that the morale is terrible. And neither one of you said that you would look to find a different avenue or a different person. I think that it would be beneficial to have more people on the board, besides the 3 seats that are available, to hold somebody accountable and to have more fresh ideas. What would you do about that as well?
Thank you. Chris?
Sure, yes,
1
our
minute.
demographics are changing. It is important that we reach out to members of the community, and we reach out in many cases in their native language, and we let them understand and know that we are all part of the same West Orange family. You know, one of the things that broke my heart when I ran last year was I had a parent of an out-of-district placement student who came to me and said, I don't feel like West Orange is my home. I don't feel like this is my district. And it is, and I've lived here my whole life, and my son has lived here his whole life, but he's placed somewhere else. And I want to be able to know more. I want to be able to do more. I want to be brought into the fold. That's something that is incumbent on the board. That's something that is incumbent upon us as a town to bring in people who feel left out. Now, when it comes to your question regarding the superintendent and adding more people to the board, you've heard me. I absolutely support that. I believe more people, better diversity of ideas, better candidate.
Thank you. Ken, you have a minute?
So a lot of this is what I was talking about, making it easier for folks to come into our schools and attend parent-teacher conferences by having them in the evening and by having translators available to, acknowledge the fact that our demographics have changed and we're not living in an era anymore where the vast majority of families are a dad who goes to work and a mom who's home and able to go to a, 1:15 in the afternoon parent-teacher conference, or, for that matter, run down to school for an early dismissal or deal with delayed openings all the time in the winter. Obviously you have to do what you have to do to keep everyone safe, but it causes real chaos for working families, and we need to do a much better job, helping them be part of the district and helping them feel welcome. And, translation, not just for conferences and stuff, but like notices that come home from PTA. We have a noticeably large Spanish-speaking population in more of our elementary schools than we don't, and most PTA stuff, except I think at the two that have the largest Spanish populations, don't go home translated at all. Sorry.
Thank you. Please.
Tony Edelstein. So scientific and medical research seem to be overwhelmingly supportive of the idea that our teenagers need to start school later than we currently start in West Orange. I know that it's a complicated task, but other districts across the country have accomplished it, and I'm just wondering what you might do to at least try to begin the exploration of that issue.
Thank you. So Ken, you can answer that if you have a minute.
Sure. So I'd like to see the district start the process by speaking with the other districts that it plays against, start talking with the teachers union about how amenable they would be to the next contract changing some hours, and start figuring out what I think is the hardest issue. The sports thing is actually easy, because what we've seen from other districts that have done this across the country is as long as the conference insists on it and all the schools switch it once, it gets done because it's no longer a problem. The issue is, for me especially, is if somebody has to be on a bus stop at 7 o'clock in the morning, like my almost 16-year-old is right now, that's not ideal, but I don't want a 6-year-old on a bus stop in the dark. So there might be more involved in just shifting. We might have to move everything later for this to work. If teachers are agreeable to it, and the research, I'd have to see more of it, but it sure seems to be trending. It seems that, I'd want to see what the actual difference is. If it changes results by a point, maybe not. But if it's a significant difference, we should absolutely be looking into this in ways like that.
Chris, you have 1 minute.
Yeah, the science absolutely supports this. To a person, when I've discussed this during the course of the campaign, parents, teachers, and yes, students appear to agree that the later start time for the older students is something that would benefit them. The science shows that academically, students perform better and the older students when they've gotten more sleep, and that the younger students don't necessarily need as many hours as the older students do. I believe that this is one of the opportunities, one of those rare opportunities on the board where we could open up a discussion and actually just begin to explore how we would accomplish this. Yes, busing is an issue. Yes, sports are an issue, but it's worth the investment of the time. It's worth the investment of the exploration, given that it will ultimately help our students academically and lead to better achievement. So I support it.
Thank you. Do we have anyone else approaching the mic? Okay. So I have some cards and some questions here. So I'm going to do my very best to just put them out as they came to me. So, and this is for both of them. If anyone wrote to specific candidates, this question will be posed to both candidates. It has been said that the problem with the West Orange Board of Education is the quote, unquote websites and quote, unquote communication. Do you really think that nicely insulting teachers is the answer to the West Orange Board of Education issues? Ken? I'm sorry, Chris, you have 1 minute.
I said at the outset that our problems run much deeper than simply communication. They run much deeper than simply our website. We have serious problems in our district that are as deep as our morale issues, that are as deep as our taxes and our spending and our wasteful spending in this district. We certainly can use better communication, of course, but we need to also recognize that there are plenty of people in administration who are communicating very well. Now, it is fine and great to have a big tent, and you want to bring in as many people under a big tent as you can to get a diversity of ideas. But after a while, you need to start recognizing who the people are who keep pulling the stakes out from that tent and who keep pulling it down. And you need to address those individuals specifically. So that's something that I would do. Again, bring back to my promise to speak truth to power.
Thank you. Ken, you have a minute.
So I think communications is a big concept. Fixing the terrible website is the simplest thing you can do to fix a communications problem, because you hire a web designer, hopefully a competent one for once, and it's fixed. So when I was asked the other night what would be one of the first things I would do, I thought that was a pretty easy one to make a change to our communications issues in the district. But if the superintendent is a jerk when he talks to teachers, that's a communications issue. The answer may be get a different superintendent, but it's still a communications issue, and it can be addressed through professional communications. It could be addressed by having a person in charge of those communications, or having a person coach to make the superintendent a better communicator. It's all communications. And, we're doing great things in our schools, but we're constantly having trouble showing people. I'm in fights on Facebook constantly with people who say, oh, our schools in West Orange are just awful. How could you send your kids there? Our schools are great, but you can't prove it because our communications are so bad and there's no data to show it anywhere.
Thank you. Ken, you'll start with this answer. What strategies do you have planned to secure the funding, programs, and support for special education in West Orange? You have a minute.
One of the things I'd really like to see is an effort from districts like West Orange to lobby the state through its representatives to fix some of the real problems we have in special education funding. Like the fact that receiving districts, when we send a child out of district, that they have the ability to retroactively, for I think it's 3 years, right, increase the tuition that they charged us as much as they want to. There's no 2% cap, there's no 10% cap. They can say, we told you it was going to cost $50,000 a year for you to send us that kid. Yeah, it cost us more. It's actually $75,000 a year, and it was for each of the past 3, so you got to pay that now. We need to lobby to fix problems like this. We need to make sure that the state is giving towns like West Orange, which are still mostly being funded based on the old district factor group when we were a GH, which was assigned in 2000. Yeah, there's been a lot of demographic change in West Orange. We're not a GH anymore, but the state won't update that. But we get next to no money from the state. That's really what I would do to try to solve this problem. It's systemic in New Jersey.
Thank you. Chris, you have 1 minute.
Yeah, certainly lobbying the state for more funds is a great idea, but we need to clean house in our own district as well. Over 100 citations with regard to the failure to provide special education services mandated in IEPs is a crying shame. That is something that proves that we are not very seriously taking into account the needs and our obligation as a district to fulfill those needs that are mandated in legally binding IEPs. We have a moral obligation to do that. We have a legal obligation to do that. We can prove to other districts that we should be a receiving district by providing services that are on par with districts like the receiving districts in Livingston or in Short Hills. I mean, these are districts that are following the rules. In Bergen County, where my wife works, you don't have the kinds of problems or citations that we do here.
Okay. Chris, we'll start with you on this one. What data regarding the superintendent is not available to you? You have 1 minute.
What is not available to me? Well, what is not available to me is the superintendent's evaluations that have been conducted by the Board of Education. So we should have about 3 years or so of those evaluations to take a look at when it comes time to determine whether or not the superintendent should be extended a new contract. I want to see why the board saw fit to give him a merit raise. I want a merit bonus. I want to see where that is substantiated in any way, in any shape or form in his evaluations. What is not available to me is his own testimony as to why he feels he should be provided with a new contract. What is available to me is, as a parent, as a member of the community, as somebody who's listening to prospective voters, is that he has alienated a very large portion of this community. That data is available to me, and that data is, of course, important when making a decision about whether or not you're going to employ someone again in this district.
Thank you. Ken, you have 1 minute.
I would endorse every word of that. We're agreeing again. I would also add the other thing that's missing is the performance data, and that's what I want to see. I don't trust Park for a lot of reasons. We've talked about it on a lot of other occasions in a lot of other places and all over WOCAS for years. But so I don't know that I would say, we can just use the Park numbers to decide. I want him to sit down if I'm on the board, before me in a personnel meeting and say, all right, show me numbers that support that the programs you've brought in have been effective. Show me you departmentalized fourth grade. I know it's only been a year or two. Let's see how let's see how 2 years of departmentalization in fourth grade have worked. Let's see the evidence. Show me something. Show me something to prove, if academics have gone down, it's, that's really the biggest missing piece. But he has to provide that, and we have to see it.
Thank you. The next question, and Ken, you will answer this first. What are your thoughts on the dress code, and how would you improve it?
So I tend to have a slightly different personal perspective on the dress code. Well, just in that it hasn't really affected me because it mostly affects girls and parents of girls, and I have boys, and that's inherently the problem with the dress code as it stands right now. It really only impacts girls, and that's sexist. And on top of that, it's not right. It's essentially body shaming. And, we're putting into the heads of young girls that they should be ashamed of what they're wearing, or they should be, it's complicated, and at some point it's like, you should dress appropriately for school, but the way it's set up right now, especially in 6th grade, it's not right, it's not fair, it's not being applied equally, and it should be changed. There was a link going around from, I think, Evanston, it was somewhere in Illinois, that was a model dress code that they established that for some reason allowed pajamas. But other than that, it made a lot of sense. It was very clear that everything would be applied equally, that there would be no body shaming, that it wouldn't be sexist. And I think, the district needs to look at doing something like that here in West Orange.
Thank you. Chris, you have 1 minute.
Yeah, you guys may know that this is a cause célèbre for me. When not a single candidate last year would touch this issue with the 10-foot pole, I made it part of my platform. Having a daughter and dealing with a dress code that is subjective and is sexist and is applied teacher by teacher in room by room is something that has caused so much agony in the homes of, not only my own home, but in the homes of other parents who have girls. I can tell you this, there is zero sense whatsoever at a Edison 6th grade pool party to pull out a girl whose midriff is showing and tell her that she can't partake in that pool party and that she has to go put on something else. And that their shirts are not long enough to cover the rest of their body because it's a distraction to boys. This goes beyond simple body shaming. It goes beyond making girls feel uncomfortable. It's potentially a Title IX violation. This is a serious issue that needs to be addressed and a new policy applied across the board.
Thank you. Chris, we'll start with your answer on this question. If a teacher is accused of harassment by a parent, the administration investigated and found no bias or harassment. The parent continues to use social media demanding the teacher be dismissed. As a board member, what would you do?
As a board member, I would want to first be certain that the HIB policy was applied correctly. I have personal knowledge that although we have a HIB law, which is a seriously flawed law, we have a policy that is not doing enough. And at times when that policy is applied, it is applied contravening the existing law. If a parent decides that they're going to go on social media, the Board of Education is not police. We don't live in a police state. I can't tell someone what they can or cannot post on social media. But what I can do is I can objectively take a look at a HIB complaint and see whether or not the policy and the law has been applied correctly. And we are not doing that in this district. The HIB problem in this district is tremendous, and we have a means of correcting that, and I would help to do that.
Thank you. Ken, you have a minute.
I think I need some more information on the nature of the investigation that was done that said that there was no harassment, and who can, if it was done independently, if it was done by an immediate supervisor, if it was done for real, if it wasn't. There's a lot out there. I don't really know. That's concerning. On the other hand, if that was truly happening, if a teacher did harass, and I assume it was a student in the example, and the parent says it's still happening and it's not being handled, that's a huge problem. On the other hand, if it's a parent who has an issue with the teacher who truly hasn't done anything wrong, you can only do so many investigations. So I don't know. I'd need to have a sense. If I were on a board, I would know what the investigation was in that case, and I could answer better. The HIV answer is not a bad one in not knowing, but you don't know that that's always applied equally either. So I don't know. That's a hard one. I'd have to look into it more.
Okay, thank you. Ken, we'll start with you. Do you favor pushing out current teachers to be replaced by minority teachers?
No. We have a great teaching staff in West Orange, and they're, the reason that our schools are so great. And, we have a lot of teachers who have advanced degrees who've been in West Orange for a long time and who bring a lot to the classroom. And I wouldn't want to lose those teachers. At the same time, as teachers retire, this is another pipeline issue. We need to make sure that we're bringing in minority applicants and that we, have a wider pool to select from so that we have more options, so that we're not just replacing a retiring white teacher with a new white teacher, but that there are, a lot of applicants to choose from so that the district can embrace diversity much better than it has.
Thank you. Chris?
I think the first say I'm a little taken aback by the tone of the question. Do we push out teachers to be replaced by minority teachers? Speaking as a minority and somebody who has a daughter in the district, as I said before, I want the best possible teacher for my child. That is the first priority and always should be the first priority. However, we also do need to recruit people. We need to recruit people of color. We need to reflect our diversity in our town. And as we discussed earlier, there are a number of ways to do that. And one of those ways is through aggressive recruitment at minority education fairs, by reaching out to historically black colleges, by encouraging our students currently in school to take up education as a career path so that they can live the commitment to their communities when they grow up. These are all the options. No one's pushing anyone out. We just need the best possible teachers we can have.
Thank you. Chris, we'll start with you on this one. The Board of Ed approved I'm trying to understand this. The Board of Ed approved an 11M ESIP plan?
But the energy saving plan, the ESIP plan?
ESIP? It looks like ESIP, yes. Do you support that board project?
Do I support the new energy plan? Well, honestly, I don't think the savings have yet borne out. There's a lot of debate as to whether or not we are going to see savings from that plan. One of these situations where it's the kind of thing I think where we need to see whether or not we're going to get the most bang for our buck. And presently, we don't have that information. So saying I could support it without the data to support it, I think is a bad idea.
Thank you. Ken?
So my understanding, the good thing about the ESIP plan is that Honeywell has, because the state requires them to, guarantees that West Orange won't pay anything more than it has. It's a guaranteed money saver. That said, the district had to spend a lot of money in bonds to get this put in. And, some of what we did as part of it, the vending machines that turn off automatically at night that are going to take 100 years to pay back, it's silly. On the other hand, it paid for some roof replacements, it paid for LED light bulbs, which do save money. I know some of the underlying assumptions in the plan are problematic, that they thought oil was going to be much more per barrel than it is, and that's one of the reasons the savings haven't really materialized. On the whole, I need to see the numbers, but from what I've seen before and what I've heard reported, I think on the balance, it's still a good deal for West Orange taxpayers. It's just not the deal that it was made out to be at the time, and the district hasn't done as well as it could or should have.
Thank you. Ken, we'll start with you with this question. Please tell us your education backgrounds, college, degrees.
Sure. I have a bachelor in science in producing for the electronic media from Syracuse University, and I do not have a master's. I do not have a JD. I'm a, college guy.
Nothing to apologize for
I
whatsoever.
have interest in education policy and read a lot about education policy and education in general. I have family members who are teachers, close friends who are teachers, and I obviously care a lot about education in this town. But no, I can't pretend that I have, I'm not a lawyer, sorry.
We can't all be.
We aspire.
Some might say thank God for that.
I'm
No.
hoping.
Some of us saw the light.
My educational background, I'm a Seton Hall University graduate. I majored in English, minored in political science and classical studies. Graduated in 1995, went on to Rutgers University Law in Newark, where I obtained my Juris Doctorate degree. And I have gone on from that to my career in the law. So that's my educational background.
Thank you. That was the last question, unless someone else has a question they'd like to approach the mic for.
Sorry. Rachel Gordon, co-founder of West Orange Cares About Schools. And we want to thank, on behalf of West Orange Cares About Schools, Essex Rising, and West Orange African Heritage Organization.
Yes.
For co-sponsoring this event with us. We want to thank Hazel, our timekeeper. We want to thank Cindy, our wonderful moderator. And we want to thank Ken and Chris for such thoughtful answers. And we really just want to encourage you to all go vote November 7th.